I was 9 years old the first time I was called the N-word by a white person, and it happened during a kickball game of all places. And once I learned the word's meaning, I didn't come to the immediate conclusion that people would hate me due to something outside of my control. I figured it was my fault, that I needed to do a better job in order to be accepted by white people. And with that in mind, growing up, I was the preppy kid. I was so well-spoken and articulate. I got good grades and I checked every box of being a non-threatening black kid. And yes, there's a checklist for that. But it didn't matter. A good amount of people still hated me or judged me due to my skin color, and it was demoralizing. However, in high school, I had to talk about it with one of my white friends, and he said, the way people feel about you has everything to do with your personality and not your skin color. To me, you're just Doyin. And then he hit me with this. I don't think racism is real. So as I maneuvered and grew up in my predominantly white Western Massachusetts town, I kept hearing what my friends said. I kept thinking to myself, racism's not real. Racism's not real. Racism's not real. So when a white owner of a video game store made me empty my pockets because I fit a profile, I figured it was my fault for looking like a criminal. When a white girl I really liked said she really liked me, but said her parents would never allow her to date someone like me, I figured it was my fault for not being nice enough or smart enough in their eyes. In other words, I had Inge living inside of me at all times. And what is that? It stands for I'm not good enough. And yes, we've all dealt with Inge before, right? But the difference is that when everyone around you tells you that you're not good enough, you may start to believe it. I know it was the case for me and for many people of color throughout America. But as I stand here now, I'm finally awake. I know, yes, that every success or failure is ultimately up to me, sure. But I also know that racism is the most persistent and pervasive problem in American history. I lost touch with that high school friend, but if I could see him now, I would tell him how racism has impacted my life negatively due to the expectations and fear that come from it. And it starts with expectations. Oh man, when I was a new dad, I went to Starbucks with my daughter, and just to get some much needed caffeine, right? Every new dad can appreciate that. So a white woman, an older white woman, came up to me and she's like, hey, like, wow, your kid's so cute and all that. I was like, yeah, she is. And then she's like, you know, it's not often that I see black men out with their kids, but it's such a wonderful thing to see. No matter what happens, and she hit me with this, I hope you stay involved in that little girl's life. And man, I wish I had a clap back for her. Like, I just froze and I was like, oh, yeah, sure, thanks. And then she left with a smile so big as if she was a superhero named Captain Caucasian, who just saved the world from a black man becoming a deadbeat dad. Yo, the microaggressions, they're like death from 1,000 paper cuts, and it's all because society doesn't think we're good enough. And I've heard them all. It's like, hey, Doyin, you went to that college? Wow, that's a really good school. So you obviously played a sport, right? You don't even act black, Doyin. I wish they could all be like you, Doyin. Yes. I've heard them all. But it's not just the microaggressions. It's the expectations of black men as criminals that's also unnerving. And I have to chuckle at this too, because a dozen white dudes could pass by a white mom with her kid on the sidewalk, but then as soon as I walk by, she clutches that kid tighter than a vice grip. And I think that's hilarious, because didn't Captain Caucasian earlier imply that black men don't like taking care of their kids, but all of a sudden we're gonna be snatching up white babies on these streets? Like, wait, what? That makes no sense. But nothing makes sense if you're a black man in America. Nothing. The expectation of black men as criminals is why I had to empty my pockets in that video game store as a teenager. It's how George Floyd gets choked out for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. And some people say that he had it coming to him. It's how Jacob Blake could be shot in the back 7 times in front of his 3 young children. And some people say it's justified. It's how some people say that all black people, yes, all black people are lawless thugs because some, a very small percentage, a minuscule percentage of black people choose to loot and vandalize businesses due to generations of begging, pleading, and asking nicely to be treated with respect and dignity, only to be ignored. Now, to be clear, would I choose to loot and vandalize businesses in order to be heard? No, I wouldn't. And here's the kicker, y'all. Neither would the overwhelming majority of black people. Here's another thing. Do I understand why some of us would choose to go to those lengths to be heard? Abso-freaking-lutely I do. That's what it's like being black in America. We are judged as a whole due to the criminal actions of a few. But sometimes the expectations aren't always low. There's a concept called the plus that explains this nicely. Think about it like this. We all, no matter what your race is, we all have similar concerns right now. Public health concerns, environmental and climate change concerns, political concerns. But then there's the things that are independent, the people of color, that impact us in so many negative ways. It's all those things that I mentioned, plus dealing with the fact that trauma porn is being put on social media of black bodies being brutalized and murdered. Plus ensuring that we don't come off as too angry or too emotional when we're dealing with racial microaggressions at work, knowing that it could impact our careers. And speaking of our careers, plus, if we have the audacity to be leaders out here, good ain't good enough, y'all. Greatness is the baseline. And perfection is the goal. And if we screw up just a little bit, it's the burden of knowing that not only will impact us, it can impact the people, the young people who may follow in our footsteps afterwards. It's also the plus of trying to explain why we belong in white spaces. For example, a lot of things that I do in life, y'all, is the sole reason of making white people feel comfortable. Think about this. Here I am, big black man. Sometimes I'm singing Disney Frozen songs when I'm walking down a sidewalk, or I'm in a dark parking garage with white people just so they know that I'm not a threat. I'm like singing, let it go, let it go. And it's like, that's crazy. But then it protects me because then those white people are like, okay, I don't have to put out the pepper spray. Oh, I don't have to call the cops. He must have kids. It's soul destroying. And it goes on and on and on. And trust me when I say this, the plus is slowly killing the black people that you know and love in America. It's just too much. The game of life is a difficult one to play if you're black, and it's almost an impossible game to win. And then there's fear, because everything we do in life is governed by one or two emotions. There's love and there's fear. And yo, big ups to those of you who wake up in the morning, you have your decaf vanilla latte, you're scribbling in your gratitude journal, you're staring at your vision board before you start your day. Yeah, that's cute. I don't do that. I mean, granted, I have the same 24 hours in a day that you do, but a good portion of that day is spent making sure that I come home to my family in one piece. Why? Because I am a 6'2", 215-pound black man. I am a high threat the moment I leave my house, and I need to be cognizant of everything that I do. For example, I'm like, hey, I want to go shopping in that nice area of town. But before I do, I need to put on my non-threatening black man costume to ensure that I get harassed less than usual. And if you're wondering what that costume is, I'm wearing it. There's also the time when I'm thinking like, hey, that white woman over there, she's smoking a cigarette at a public playground, and I'm pretty sure that's against the law. But instead of calling her out, I'm just gonna grab my kids and go because I can't risk her calling the cops on me. A few years ago, in my predominantly white neighborhood, There's a black dude who was sexually assaulting white women. And as soon as I saw the composite sketch of this guy and I realized that he looked a little too similar to me, I did not leave my house for 4 days until he was apprehended because I knew my life could be in danger if I did. But the fear doesn't just reside in me. My kids feel it as well. Remember my daughter who was in the stroller earlier? Here she is now. She's 9 now. She came to me the other day, sobbing in tears and said, "I don't want you to get shot, Daddy," because I'm an anti-racism facilitator for a living. So I did what any good dad would do in that situation. I lied to her. I told her that everything would be okay, even though all evidence points towards the opposite. Now, think about that for a minute. Wrap your head around this. A child is crying and fearing for her dad's life because I want to teach Americans how to treat people of color with compassion, respect, and dignity. How messed up is that? I would want my white friend to know that fear is a default setting for me. I wake up in fear. I go to sleep in fear. I walk my adorable puppy throughout my neighborhood in fear. I drive my car in fear. And I talk to white people in fear, and I hate it. But it's my survival mechanism. I often wonder how much more I could do, how much more I could be, and how much more I could offer America if I wasn't scared due to being a big black man in this country. And I also wonder, will I ever have the opportunity to find out? Man, I hope so, y'all, because I'm tired. I am so damn tired. Someone once asked me, if America was a body, like the human body, would racism be an organ or disease? So in other words, would racism be something that's inherent in us, innate in us, that we just have to live with? Or is it something that's slowly killing us that we have to eradicate at all costs? By now, you probably know the answer. And if my white friend was in front of me, I'd just say here, "Hey man, so you just heard me speak. What do you think about racism now?" And if he's like, "Hey man, you're just another whiner, waving around the race card, trying to get sympathy from the white man." Okay, cool. Would you be surprised to know that I almost took my own life 3 years ago due to racism? The fear and expectations that come from it were almost too much to bear because I'm an empath. I'm someone who feels every emotion deeply. And being hated due to something outside of my control was almost something that cost me my life. And I promise you that there are countless people of color who feel the same way now that I felt 3 years ago. And this is not a game, y'all. This is not a game. This is seriously life and death. And we're not asking for much. We're just asking for equality. So when we ask for equality, it should simply be met with, yeah, it's a good idea. Let's do that. But instead, we hear countless reasons why it will never happen, and that is soul destroying. Or, on a positive note, or he may be like, yeah, you know what, man? I think racism is a problem. Well, duh, but I'm not here to shame you, dog. Welcome to the party. Get your boots on, let's go to work. I also tell him this, is that being quietly non-racist is not helpful. Being anti-racist is often confrontational and uncomfortable. Because this whole thing is binary. Either you're anti-racist or you're racist. There's no fence sitting. It's one or the other. So I could see him. He's like, okay, well, Doyin, what do I do, bruh? What do I do, man? I want to help, bruh. So first off, why are you coming to me at the end of my talk asking me this? This is a time thing. I only have a few minutes left. There's a million things I could tell you, but I'll give you a few in the time I have left. Cool? Cool. All right. First thing's this. I would suggest that you tell your white family members that behavior is not welcome in your home. I'd also tell you or suggest to you that you call out the people who are being racist on social media and say that their jokes aren't funny. I'd also suggest that you stand up for your black colleagues who are subjected to racial microaggressions in the office. I would also suggest that you proudly state that Black Lives Matter is not a political statement. It's a human rights statement. And most importantly, my most important suggestion, my dear friend, is this. I hope you raise your white kids to fight against racism at all costs, because I want them to grow up viewing anti-racism as the norm and not the exception. Because somewhere in America, there's a black kid being called the N-word and may not think that he belongs in America and may take his own life because of it. Somewhere, there are black kids fearing for their dad's life, just like my kids did. It's just too much, y'all. They deserve better. We all deserve better. But we have to work together to end this nightmare. Because one thing my friend said that still resonates, the way people feel about you has everything to do with your personality and not your skin color. We're not there yet, but if we ever get there, we would have truly succeeded in creating an anti-racist world. Thank you.